Going to be talking a little bit about how hurricanes actually form, and then also some of the dangers with hurricanes. We're in a beautiful location here, and believe it or not, back in 1989 when Hurricane Hugo hit this exact spot and the eye of the hurricane came over, all of this was underwater with about 9 or 10 feet of water. So you can see how a beautiful location like this can actually turn into quite a problem, especially for people that live here and then everybody that's traveling through the area as well. So Charleston has been hit before, and we will be hit again. It just depends. And of course, other places along the coast, especially North Carolina coast, up toward Georgetown, where you are, Beth. There's a lot of dangers along the coast, so we'll talk about that. But for all those school kids and teachers and homeschoolers that are listening further inland, like in Ohio or some of the other states, there are actually dangers that go with a hurricane, believe it or not, away from the coast. And so we'll talk about those dangers. We've seen that over the last couple of years. So first we're going to talk about how the hurricanes actually form. And the easiest way I can kind of describe a hurricane is to talk about a car or a car engine. A hurricane is a good engine. Of course, it needs a lot of different things to become a perfect type of hurricane or storm. One of the big things is what we have is exhaust. Of course, a car engine needs exhaust, and a good hurricane needs that as well. And the way we do that is actually by having strong upper level winds or wind speeds, way up at the levels of where airplanes fly, to actually have that to exhaust the actual storm. And so we need the exhaust. Now the fuel for the storm, or the fuel for the engine, is for a car gasoline, but actually for a hurricane is going to be the warm water, warm and humid air as well. And of course we always find that in the ocean. There's a lot of other variables that come together to create those really big hurricanes. And a little kind of a cross section there of the inside of a hurricane. We've got, everybody's heard of the eye of the hurricane before. That's actually a place that's actually quite calm. Back in 1989 when Hugo came across this area, the eye came right overhead and people actually got out of their homes and looked at the calm weather, especially in the middle of the night. We don't recommend that by any means because it's quite dangerous, because after the hurricane passes and after the eye passes, we actually will have some intense rain and winds again. So it's kind of a false sense of security, but when you actually look into what we see as a meteorologist, as a weather person, looking at weather radar, this is an example of Hurricane Brett that was actually hitting the Texas coast years back. And that middle calm section where the blue is, you can see the eye. And that's actually the area that we track. For all the teachers out there, I'm hoping that during hurricane season you have a hurricane tracking chart and actually can plot some of these hurricane and tropical storms to help the kids learn about latitude and longitude and actually where the storm actually goes. A lot of dangers encompass the actual hurricane. The eye wall is the area of storms right around, and on the image there you can see that's that red area right around the donut hole or the eye. That's where the most intense rain and winds are. And then we have the rain shield and the spiral bands that rotate around the actual hurricane. It is a low pressure area, which if you've been studying maybe low pressure areas in your school, you may know that at least in the northern hemisphere that rotates counterclockwise. And so these storms come on shore while actually spinning a certain direction. The tropical systems are a lot of them. There's different disturbances, there's tropical depressions, and there's also tropical storms and actually hurricanes. Right here is an actual picture of a disturbance. A disturbance is kind of just a cluster of thunderstorms that, in this picture actually right here, we actually are looking off the South Carolina and Georgia coast, just a cluster of thunderstorms. It's not really organized at this point, so a lot of the experts down at the Hurricane Center, which is located down in Miami, a bunch of meteorologists down there, actually are following this. They'll follow this and kind of maybe even decide whether or not to fly out some hurricane hunters out to that type of location. Tropical depression. This is what we have right now in the Bay of Campeche, down off the coast of Mexico and in Texas. It's a cluster of storms, but it's actually a little bit better organized, and with wind speeds of 39 miles per hour. When we determine whether or not a system is a depression or a storm or hurricane, a lot of the times we use the wind speeds as the criteria. And so once the winds get to a certain level, then we change whether or not it's a storm or a hurricane. Tropical storm, everybody's heard of then the names, right? Well, to give you a little bit of background, back when we actually started naming storms were decades ago. Before that, back in the 20s and 30s, we actually only had names with the year that it occurred, like the hurricane of 1930 or the hurricane of 1929 or so on. There's actually a group of meteorologists that are in a worldwide committee that actually determine the names. And if you've noticed, there's never been another Hurricane Hugo before. It's because if the hurricanes are actually devastating enough, if they cause enough damage or so on, they'll actually retire those names. So Katrina, there will never be another Hurricane Katrina, or Hugo, or Floyd, or some of the, exactly. Let's say the tropical storm is developing further into actually wind speeds now of 74 miles per hour. This will now become a hurricane, and of course the Hurricane Center will be tracking that, and of course with the local weather service offices as well. The hurricane typically has an eye, and I think most people have heard of the eye of a hurricane before. That is the center of the storm, and that's actually where we'll track it. We'll actually look on satellite and through other means to actually track those type of features. Back in the days, there were a couple of meteorologists, and they came up with a scale of actually how to register and how to keep track of these hurricanes. And one of them was named Saffir, and the other one was named Simpson. So they decided to make a Saffir-Simpson scale. And so this is when you hear Category 1 or 2 or 3 hurricanes. These are the meteorologists that decided the different categories. And so through there you can see, luckily in the United States, we've only had a few landfalling Category 5 hurricanes. These are the devastating ones of winds of well over 155 miles per hour. That will wipe out areas along the coast. So, where are the experts and where are they flying? Well, there's a group of experts down at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. They're part of the Air Force Reserve, and they're called hurricane hunters. And now these hurricane hunters are pretty brave souls. They actually go on these airplanes and fly in the middle of these hurricanes. And while I don't recommend everybody doing that, these are experts, and they have the proper aircraft, and I'm sure there's a lot of padding in there because it is probably very bumpy, I know. And they will actually help us in that they'll get the best information, the highest wind speeds, the pressures that we need to know, so we can forecast where these bad storms are actually going to go. This is typically kind of what they'll do. Believe it or not, they'll fly right through the center. And as we kind of just learned, the center of the storm is while the center, the eye is fairly calm, around that is the eye wall, and they fly right through it, which is the most dangerous part of the actual storm. And this is how they get a fix of where that hurricane actually is. Let's talk about some of the dangers associated with the hurricanes now. We just kind of alluded to that. Tornadoes and water spouts, flooding, rain, surge. Surge, especially near the coast here, is very important because people that live along the coast, just like I mentioned here, we have this massive amount of water rise that happens with the surge. It's basically the winds pushing the water onto shore. And so that can be upwards of 25 feet, especially around when Katrina hit a couple years ago around Biloxi, Mississippi. Water level rise up to 25 feet, and there's a great picture there that shows the damage in Katrina of a beach house that has basically been wiped out based on this high water rise. So it's definitely the biggest danger if you live right at the coast. There's a picture locally of a nice pier that was there right off of Folly Beach here, just a stone's throw away. And after Hugo came through with only about a 10-foot or 15-foot surge here, really devastated the whole restaurant and little shop there, and basically just made it to ruin. So it's a very dangerous thing. And there's a picture from Katrina. They have some registered marks there of water as high as 30 feet on some hotels. So it kind of tells you how fast and how dangerous the water rise can be. I love these pictures here for a reason, and the reason is that it explains to you when we have a hurricane or any sort of high wind event coming through, we tell people to go indoors. And when you see pictures of tree trunks like this with a piece of plywood or a piece of 2x4 in the middle of it, you can see the force of wind. It's actually making any little piece of roof or piece of straw or piece of metal as a missile that can stick through a tree trunk or anything like that. So it's a quite fierce, especially when you have winds of upwards of 100 miles per hour blowing through. A couple of pictures of Katrina. Everybody was following Katrina a couple years ago, and unfortunately there was a lot of devastation. There's a big satellite picture there of the eye of Katrina, and then a lot of the different damages that we kind of see there. So it's not a good thing. Okay, so I think we're pretty much done here, but I appreciate all the involvement with the kids and the questions, and I'd like to thank Robin Van Dyke, who's a meteorologist at our Weather Service office in Charleston, who put the presentation together. Unfortunately, she's working right now at the office, but I wish she could be here. But other than that, I'll be looking forward to hopefully talking to you about lightning and tornadoes a little bit later.